All right, Internet, hello. Happy day after, or week after Thanksgiving. Andy looks like he gained about 4 pounds of Filipino turkey. And Andy, where did you go? Where did you go last week?
I went up to the East Bay area of San Francisco.
Beautiful. I was in Sacramento, and so that lovely drive up the 99.
Yeah.
It's so fun. If you're not familiar with California, it's pretty much 3 states. In one. There's Southern California, there's Northern California, and then Central California is just big, flat agriculture. It could be the Midwest.
Yeah.
It is, and it's just this 250-mile grind of like crops and cows, and it's like being back home.
And there's like 3 options, or no, there's 4 options. You take the 101 on the coast, or the 5 or the 99 through the middle of the state, or
we're all about the 99.
Yep.
So happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hope you survived. We want to say a couple things. Number one, just to get all the business out of the way, reminder, we have this podcast. And this podcast is housed now at voxpodcast.com. Mm-hmm. We also have the church podcast that we do, which is the teachings and the stories. And my goodness, the story from yesterday, we were recording on a Monday today, was freaking ridiculous. Mm-hmm. A young lady named Kelly was unbelievable. That is found at voxoc.com. Mm-hmm. And those are more Bible-y sort of teachings. And then we just set up, Andy, it's been a week out now, and we have like 26 people who are supporting us, and it's unbelievable, dude, how incredible that is. We have an account at Patreon, which is a way of providing ongoing support in a Kickstarter fashion to projects.
Yeah.
And there are different levels of rewards, and I've been shocked at how many people are choosing the big one.
Yeah.
So if that's you, thank you. And that's so unbelievably appreciated. We're just thrilled. So You guys are amazing. Anything you want to add about the details on that?
Yep, absolutely. So today I'm going to be sending out an email to the folks that have signed up that gives them access into the Facebook group that we've started, access to selecting books as the incentives,
nice.
And all of that. So those emails are actually going out today. And then for those signing up ongoing, that will come out more frequently. So
this is November 28th,
Yep,
2016.
Yeah.
Right now. You heard it here first. Just think about it. Think about this, though. With the internet, our kids could listen to this like, 10 years from now, mm-hmm. and be like, man, my dad was a total weirdo. He probably thinks that already, but isn't that weird? Just, I don't know why that occurred to me, but I don't know. Okay. That had nothing to do with it. All right. So Andy, thank you for setting all that up. That is outstanding. And again, we're not in this to make money. We want to continue to improve, and so this is about resources and our equipment and particularly Andy's expertise and my genius. And no, I don't know. I mean, this is just a great way to help support the thing.
Yeah,
so
98% of the funds go to supporting Mike's genius.
Yes. Let's be honest. All right, now today, what I wanted to do is my brother. So I was just with my brother. I have a younger brother. He lives in Sacramento. Brad, thank you for hosting Thanksgiving. He was telling me about a Facebook group that he's in that they listen to the podcast and then they discuss it on Facebook.
Nice.
And he was saying that there's some Muslim gentlemen part of this. There's some folks from the gay community. It's a really eclectic group.
Oh, cool.
And so he was just talking about some of the stuff they talked about. I was like, dude, that's what Vox is supposed to be, is a conversation starter in relationships, right? So our tagline is we want to talk about anything so that because people have used the thing that encourages us most is that people will give this podcast to friends and family members with whom they can't have direct conversations about hard issues.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And we've had several instances of that where at least somebody said, yeah, we've had this huge tension in our family between one Christian side of the family and this person over here. So I gave this person the podcast and that opened up a conversation. And beautiful. That If that's what's happening, we're so very excited about that. But my brother texted me, and he said there's some things though I've never heard you talk about that our group wonders. So I thought, oh, well, this is interesting. So this is the post-Thanksgiving, Brad, here you go. He said, basically, we talk about how it's sad science, and specifically climate change, is considered a political view instead of fact. Shouldn't Christians be just as concerned with the welfare of the planet as much as they are with all the other issues? Why aren't Christians being more vocal about it, and why do they not seem to care? Lastly, why do Christians seem to non-believers to be anti-science? We talk about all the issues right now with fracking, pipelines, etc., and all the other stuff. You don't hear much about it from Christians or their views. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, that's really interesting, and that's not a topic at all that we've discussed.
Right.
And this is something that there have been several things that my views have been radically changed from when I first started following Jesus. My view of the environment is one of those things. And it also happens to be one of those things where the culture has been ahead of the church. There are times when culture actually leads the church to areas of concern that should be Christian, but haven't been. And the environment is one of those. I remember in high school, I had a buddy of mine who was completely and ridiculously obsessed with recycling. He started recycling programs. This was before recycling was just part of what you did. Mm-hmm. And, we all just thought, oh, this is, kind of a pet project of his, kind of weird, whatever. He was so ahead of the curve. And so the more I've studied the scriptures, the more I realized, boy, that is a huge moral issue that Christians have completely been silent on for two reasons: one theological and one economic. And so first of all, I want to present the view that Christians should have, at least if they take the Bible seriously. Secondly, the reason why we haven't is there's a theological issue and there's an economic issue, at least in my mind. And again, I mean, who am I? This is just me guessing. And then I want to see what you think. All right, Andy Bear?
Yep.
So first of all, if you take the biblical story seriously, and seriously doesn't always mean literally, it doesn't always mean that you believe it's the inerrant word of God. I just mean if you allow the Christian story of the scriptures to shape your orientation to the world, then in Genesis 1, you read about a God who creates, right? Genesis 1 is this poem. It's this historical narrative poem where God is in a pattern very specifically creating. And then over a period of days, and there's so much debate about the days and, so and so and so. And those are all fascinating podcasts we can have in the future. But the point comes where God decides to create human beings. And so there's this very famous verse in the first chapter of the Bible, Genesis 1, where God says, let us make, and the us, it's interesting, it's a plural there, let us make humanity in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, over the livestock, all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. God created humanity in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. God blessed them, said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, over every living creature that moves on the ground. So you have two huge pieces of theological information embedded in those verses. The first is, well, you actually have more than that. Two huge relative to this topic. First one is that human beings are made in the image of God and in the likeness of God. Now, those Hebrew words have to do with the way ancient Near Eastern kings would extend their sovereignty over their kingdoms. So if you were an ancient Near Eastern ruler and you wanted to express your rulership over an area of land, you would make an image or a likeness of yourself and place it in different regions of land to declare your sovereignty over it.
Okay.
The other way you would use image and likeness is that you would use them in the temple. So you would have images and likenesses of yourself as a god or a king in a temple dedicated to you. Mm-hmm. So there's thought, and I'm very sympathetic to this thought, that what God's doing is God is fashioning a temple for God to dwell in. and that human beings are going to be the priests that serve in this temple. And to be the priests, they are to be image bearers and likeness bearers. So they represent faint echoes of what God is like, but the words themselves convey the idea that they are co-regents, they are co-rulers with God. They are representations of God's benevolence over the created world. Makes sense? It's almost as if God delegates some authority to them, because certainly God could rule and subdue way better than the humans could.
Right.
But he creates them as image bearers, which is it's got huge theological freight. So there's massive dignity in just simply being a human person, regardless of how efficient you are, regardless of whether or not you have special needs or not, right? There's massive theological freight there. But even beyond that, it's the idea that human beings stand in a unique relationship between God and creation. They're part of creation, and so they reflect creation back to God, but more importantly, they reflect God to creation. In other words, they're kind of, they're stand-betweeners, if you will. They're mirrors where they're reflecting the sovereignty, the goodness, the intelligence, the purpose, the deliberateness of God's intention for creation to creation on God's behalf.
Right. Okay, so let me take a crack at trying to make sure I got my head around that. Okay, so an interesting thought as I'm hearing it is, okay, we see this in modern day ways of putting a flag in an area that you're claiming is
Right.
my land. Okay,
That's
so
good. That's
American
good.
flags all over the U.S. and different
Right.
places. So that's
And
like,
on the moon.
on the moon,
For
sure,
crying out loud.
right? Versus like you visit Rome nowadays, and you can see all the different fashioned like idols and
Sure.
all those things. So what
Or
I
like
get-
an embassy. So if you're in a foreign
Sure.
country and you see the American flag,
Yeah.
that's American soil.
Exactly. So then in the ancient Greek world, we'll say, is all of the fashioned like statues of what
Correct.
resembled the god, that
That's
kind
right.
of ruled
That's
that
right.
area.
Right.
So when I hear what you say about us as if the human being is the physical imagery of what God is like, to suggest I'm putting them into the earth as a way to have dominion and its dwelling, it goes far beyond like a building and a room and a temple. If I'm standing in a
Correct.
forest, it's a way that God says nature can recognize God because of this human being in nature. Does that almost present an idea of even nature's submission to a human's what's the word that's used there, dominion, like how if humans have dominion over the land, both like animals and
Right,
nature,
right.
it suggests that there's a certain amount of submission that nature has to man's
Right, which means two things. First of all, when humanity falls, the earth becomes cursed too.
Okay.
So Paul makes this in Romans 8, where all of creation is in bondage, groaning, waiting for the sons and daughters of God to be revealed.
Okay, yeah.
In other words, there is an inextricable link between the state of humanity and the state of the created order. Right, which is built in from the very intention of God.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, that is massive.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I was going to say, I forgot.
I'm sorry.
Because I was making that point. No. Because I was queuing off of what you were saying, that there's the inextricable link between humanity and creation, and there was something else. So I don't remember what it was. Let me keep going, and it will come back to me. So you're absolutely right. The second point was you were saying, listen, that nature ultimately should respond to human dominion. Mm-hmm. Now, here's what's interesting. The original sin was when a human being listened to a creature over the creator.
Oh,
so instead of having rulership over the creature, the humans listened to the creature rather than the creator. So it was inverted.
Yeah.
And what God does out of that is that God curses the ground, so the ground no longer cooperates with the humans. And that's in Genesis 3.
Making it difficult for man to therefore have provision, so he has to work for it.
Correct. By the sweat of your brow.
Yeah.
I mean, all that stuff. The woman, pain in childbirth, all of that. I mean, it's just absolutely genius if you take the story seriously. And again, whether you think it's literal or the snake was talking or whatever, set that all aside for a second. The theological freight being brought to the Christian story by these verses is massive. Okay? So there's a link between human beings and the created order. So when the human beings fall, the creation falls too. That's why, that's the Christian answer to why is there like natural evil? Why are there earthquakes, tsunamis? Why are there tornadoes? It's because nature itself is out of whack, because humans were out of whack.
Right.
So there's, I mean, think about the implications of that for the environment, right?
Sure.
Now, then you get to the specific words that are used. So they're to fill the earth, which is interesting. So when God creates, God fills. So the sky becomes filled with stars. The sea becomes filled with fish. The land becomes filled with animals. Now the humans are to fill the earth with humans. In other words, they're to take the initiative to create in a very small way, in the same way that God created. So why did God institute a Sabbath rest? Because God rested, so humans are to rest. So this is part of image bearing. We create because God created. We work because God worked. We rest because God rested. Like, this is part of how it's all woven together. So the first command is for human beings to fill in the same way that God filled space, to fill with other human beings. The second command then is rule. And then the word is subdue. And then other words are used that are take care of it or work the ground. Now, all of these words are really, really interesting in Hebrew. And it would be an interesting podcast, if anyone cares, to go through each of these words, because these words not only have to do with building culture, but some of them are worship words. They're words that are used of priests' work later in the story. So that, again, backfilling the image that God is turning the earth into a temple, and then Eden was the point where that temple began, and that the human beings were to extend Eden all throughout the earth. That Eden was a part of the earth, a section of the earth, but they were to extend Eden to fill the earth. Right. And there's thought that that's where all the other people are. It's not that Adam and Eve were the first people created or the only people created. It was that they were the first people created in Eden. Right. And that then they would fill the earth and extend the boundaries of Eden to encompass the whole earth. Now that's a whole different weird conversation. But to my brother's point, rule, subdue the earth, or kabosh is the word. It's this great Hebrew word. Those words have nothing to do with strip mining and polluting. These are words that have to do with, as an act of worship, extending God's providence, sovereignty, care, justice, and benevolence to creation on his behalf. That's what those words have to do with. So God wasn't looking for puppets, and he wasn't looking for slaves. He was looking for partners. So God was looking for cooperative participants, which has all sorts of implication for image bearers, right? So unlike the statues and unlike the idols, God created free moral agents who are rational, who have will, who have desire. God created them because that's what God's like. Okay? That ties back in there. And God created them as an act of joy, worship, and fulfillment for the humans, for their flourishing, to cooperatively partner with God in extending his benevolent rulership over the entire earth. Okay, so what happened is that the human beings fell from their original purpose, even though that mandate to care for the earth still exists. Now we're more interested in caring for ourselves. We're more interested in, the way Paul puts it in Romans, we're more apt to worship and serve created things rather than the creator. And then you have creation no longer cooperating, right? No matter how good we get, we'll never be able to take away earthquakes.
Right, yeah, because it's like even with the mandate to take care of nature, it's like nature's still working against you because of the original curse in the fall.
Correct.
Right.
Now, again, only if you take the Christian source seriously.
Right, yeah.
But to my brother's point, the implications of this are that Christians are to be the leaders in care of animals, in care of fish, in care of the sea, in care of the land, in climate change. Absolutely, we should absolutely be ahead of the game. We should have always been ahead of the game. We should absolutely be the folks most passionate about the whales that wash up on shore, about the dolphins that get caught in nets, about the sea turtles that need to be protected. Absolutely. But these conversations have been hijacked by they've been politicized.
Right.
So that these are they're very much seen as liberal,
Yes.
bleeding heart concerns.
Right.
As opposed to the conservative concerns of, let's just make sure business keeps running. So there are two reasons that I see for why we, and I'm grouped in here, have not picked up this vocation in the way that it was originally given to us. First one is this, and it is purely economic. We have been bred and born to see capitalism as a Christian right and a Christian responsibility. Socialism is a bad word. Marxism is a dirty word. But capitalism, that is God's gift to God's gift to the world.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the way we see democracy. We don't see democracy as the least worst option. We see democracy as like, no, this is our divine right.
Right.
Well, we see capitalism the same way. And if you are not bounded by anything other than maximizing profit for shareholders, then you're not going to care about the environment. You're just not. And unfortunately, and I'm guilty of this, we as Western evangelical Christians have more often christened the values of American culture rather than challenged them. Mm-hmm. So if individualism is one of the things, we've certainly christened that in Christian terms, but I would also say the value of profit over everything else. And so whether we're working in sweatshops, whether we're getting coffee from migrant workers, whether we are, all of that stuff. And it's so big because the economy is so entangled. It's almost just easier to go to Walmart and buy, or go to Costco for me and buy shorts, right? Yeah. I don't care where they're made. I don't have time to research it. It's too much for me.
Right. The culture of convenience.
Totally. Culture of convenience and price.
Yep.
And because it's a culture of consumerism. I'm taught from the earliest my earliest memories, you look for something that gives you the best deal at the smallest price. And that's what the consumer is, right? Mm-hmm. The greatest benefit with the smallest risk or smallest cost. And so we do this with relationships. We do this with everything. So my point is, when it comes to Christians standing up to unfettered economic profit, many of us just are, we're worried about the stock market too. Yeah. We want our investments to do well too. We got our 401ks as well. Do we really want to raise all that noise? No, that's not all of us, but that's some of us.
Yeah.
But the second one, and this is the bigger one, the second one has to do with, we have been told a false story about the earth. And so this is actually, for our little church for Christmas, we're studying hell. And so there's going to be some overlap on what I'm going to talk about now and what we talked about yesterday. And but here is, Andy, can you put the diagrams up?
Sure.
The diagrams you did for me? Yeah, put those up in the show notes.
Okay.
Because I think they'll be really helpful.
Okay.
So the standard Christian story. Can you do that?
Yeah, I got away.
You got away?
Yeah.
You always have a way. The standard Christian story is this. We live on earth, and then there's judgment coming. And that judgment is based on, how good you were, or did you know the name of Jesus, and can you say it in the multiple choice test at the pearly gates, or whatever it is. And then the result of that judgment is one of two destinations. You either go to heaven or you go to hell. Mm-hmm. Now, once the earth only matters until judgment. And then the earth on this view is just burned up. We're spending forever in heaven or we're spending forever in hell. The earth is no longer an issue.
Okay.
And so many, for generations, people have taught about the environment. Listen, what matters most is saving souls, getting them into heaven. The earth is going to burn. It's like rearranging, deck chairs on the Titanic. It's irrelevant. Okay, yeah. Great. Yes, let's care for dolphins and let's care for turtles. But what's of more infinite importance is whether or not the soul next to you is going to spend eternity with God or eternity in hell. Right. That's the standard Christian story.
Right.
And the earth only plays a part now. Mm-hmm. That, however, is not the biblical story, not even close to the biblical story.
Okay.
And if you read the Gospels of Jesus, it's never the story Jesus tells. Not once, not ever. Never did Jesus look at somebody and say, hey, do you know where you're going to go if you die tonight? Not once did Jesus ever threaten hell to non-believers. He only talked about hell to covenant people, which is fascinating. We'll talk about that down the road.
So that's diagram 1. So diagram 1 is showing a picture of the earth in which then judgment takes place and suggests that there's only 2 new locations in which you end up, which is either heaven or hell.
Correct.
Okay.
That's it.
Great.
Diagram number 2.
Yes.
Diagram number 2 begins with the union of heaven and earth. And you get that from passages like Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in their vast array. Genesis 2:4. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created.
Okay, one quick question about that, because we got this in our Q&A yesterday. Because someone asked, like, where there's a later references of the use of heaven. Is it the exact same reference as God's creation of heavens and earth? Like, are those the same, or are they?
Well, there's nuance.
Okay.
So you have so the standard Jewish view, from what I understand, is that there were 3 heavens. So heavens can mean the air around you. Heavens can mean space, or heavens. Sometimes the highest heavens can be the place where God dwells.
Okay.
And intersects with the earth. So yes, it becomes nuanced, but no, it's never heaven. It's never singular. It's always heavens.
Okay. All right.
So Jesus will talk about the kingdom of the heavens. Rather than the kingdom of heaven. But that's man, there's so many rabbit trails here.
Great. Okay.
So the first point I was making is that when you start the biblical story, heaven and hell's not mentioned, even remotely. Hell isn't the counterpart of heaven, earth is. So this is from Joshua Ryan Butler. He makes this great point in one of his books. That heaven and hell are never mentioned together. It's always heaven and earth. So if you want the counterpart of heaven is earth, not hell. Okay? So just start there.
Yeah.
Now, then you have the teaching early in Genesis of God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Now, who knows what the freaking heck that means, except it means this, that heaven and earth were joined in ways they're not currently. Okay? So the second diagram starts with the union of heaven and earth. Heaven and earth are together. They're interlocked, they intersect, they're united, because here's God creating the heavens and the earth, but he's dwelling on the earth with human beings. Okay, now, so that's step 1. Step 2 is the fall, which we've already referenced. The entrance of sin and death, the entrance of fear and blame and guilt, the entrance of all of those things as a result in Genesis 3-11 of the entrance of murder, the entrance of selfishness, of sin, of rebellion, all of that stuff is inserted. It's an intruder into God's good world. And as a result, heaven and earth are now spoken of as separated in a weird way, as interlocking and intersecting still, but now God doesn't dwell the way he dwelt before. And so you have passages like Psalm 115, which says, the highest heavens belong to the Lord, but the earth he's given to man. Or you have Jesus saying something like, pray so that God's will would be done on earth as it is in heaven. So heaven being the place where God's will is done, earth being the place where other wills are done. Right. So now there's some distinction, right? There's some rupture. Maybe that's the best word. There's a fracture.
It's like, to me, I'm thinking, like, is it because we think of the spiritual realm as divided from the physical realm?
Right, and like that is totally wrong.
Right, and it's
totally
interesting in the previous reference of God walking and dwelling among it. It seems like a picture of both in simultaneous.
Yes, union.
Yeah,
union. Yeah, exactly right.
Okay, so that's interesting to me. Okay,
so now you have this rupture that happens, and I go into all sorts of texts. In the teaching about, okay, well, here are just examples of how it's talked about. God's ruling from the heavens and he judges the earth. I mean, there's this separation now. Then there's judgment, okay? And that judgment is spoken of in this really convoluted passage in 2 Peter. Now, again, I recommend you get the teaching from Vox Podcast. Vox Community. Get the teaching from Vox Community from November 27th.
Yeah, I'll try. I'll drop a link in the show notes on this.
Boom. So this gets into I'm redoing the teaching a little bit here, but it's totally relevant to the environment question, because if you live according to diagram 1, the standard Christian story is, hey, all we're doing is getting evacuated out of here. The earth's going to burn. Mm-hmm. Then you don't care about the environment. All you care about are saving souls.
Yeah.
But that's not the biblical story. The biblical story is the earth begins united with the heavens. There's a rupture there. And then there's judgment. And Peter talks about this. And he talks about the earth and the elements of the earth being destroyed by fire, and its elements being laid bare. And this is a little technical, but when it talks about destroyed by fire, immediately that word destroyed is used immediately before this reference to reference the flood of Noah in Genesis, where God doesn't destroy the earth, but he purifies the earth from all evil. Mm-hmm. And so destroyed there doesn't mean annihilated and start over. It means purified. And so the fire, the judgment that God does is he purifies the earth from what? Well, from everything that's intruding in on that was never meant to be here, right? All of the evil and the suffering and all of that. And then it says the earth will be destroyed by fire, which I read as purified, and its elements will be laid bare. The word laid bare is the word that we use to get the word eureka. And it's a word that means to discover what was there all along, but it was hidden. In other words, the judgment that's spoken of in the Bible isn't a destructive judgment, it's a purative judgment. It purifies and it reveals what's really true, what's really good, what's really right, what's really righteous, what's really pure, right? And the reason that judgment is good news is because one of the last images of the Bible is an image that's first found in Isaiah that Peter references but is pulled through into Revelation, where John sees a new heaven and a new earth coming down out of heaven, a holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven, and God now residing on earth with human beings, which is the reunification of heaven and earth. All right. Mm-hmm. So here's the plot. The plot is heaven and earth were united. Heaven and earth have been ruptured because of the fall. Judgment is coming that will purge evil out of God's good world. And the result will be a new heavens and new earth. And there are two Greek words for new. One means new as in starting over, and the other means new as an upgrade. And new as an upgrade is the word that's used there. In other words, this is Earth 2.0, right? And so we don't live in heaven forever. Heaven is actually just the first step in a round trip journey. Where we spend forever is here. And what do? Well, Paul tells us we've got resurrected bodies, transfigured bodies. Fantastic. So we'll still be human beings doing human things on a renewed earth with God walking among his people, right? So there you go. That's the biblical story.
Yeah.
Now, in that telling of the biblical story, the earth is central.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The thing isn't just going to burn up. It's not going to be thrown away. The idea is that everything that you do that is good carries forward into the new earth, right? So the fire that purifies is the fire that gets rid of the junk, but all that is good, and Paul uses this image in 1 Corinthians, all that is good carries forward. So all the care that we have about the earth, all of that carries forward into the new heavens and the new earth. See, we make the story, the first diagram is the story about the human soul. What happens to the human soul after you die? Jesus never talked about that. Not once did he talk about that. He used standard images of like Lazarus being in a flaming abyss because he treated a poor man poorly. He uses stock images, but he never, ever, ever walked around saying, hey, do you know where you'll go when you die? His deal was, listen, the kingdom of God is now available to you right here and right now in my presence. Will you turn from all other allegiances and put trust in this? That was his invitation.
Yeah.
We've turned it into something far more different. Now, what Jesus then would invite people into is a process of something called discipleship, where we begin to align ourselves with the movement of God in the world. And part of the movement of God in the world is fulfilling the original mandate he gave to humans originally that has been reinforced multiple times, most specifically after the flood, where God says, nope, your job is to care for the earth, to extend the boundaries of Eden, to, even though Eden, is this thing now that because of the fracture and the fall that we can't ever get back to extend the boundaries of God's benevolent rulership, that we don't just care about money, we don't just care about profit, we don't just care about convenience, that there's something more as God cares for his, and there's a fascinating theology of how God treats animals throughout the biblical story. There's one part in specifically where he is demanding the protection of animals throughout different judgments he's making. And so it's fascinating. Mm-hmm. I hear the pushback from conservatives, well, that's just a liberal cause. And the fact that we've made it a political issue shows everything we've been talking about with Jesus and politics, namely that we've made politics and our allegiance to politics and our passions about politics way more important than our discipleship to Jesus. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, immigration, love of neighbor, those aren't political issues, those are Jesus issues. Creation care, that's not a liberal issue, that's a Jesus issue. Mm-hmm. The inviting people to be rescued out of the slavery to self into the grand freedom of following Jesus, that's not a political issue, that's a Jesus issue, right? I mean, mm-hmm. Just end of story. So to my brother, I would simply say this. Because the church has taught a truncated or sometimes false view of the story, we've rendered the earth meaningless. Mm-hmm. Because there's no future for it, and the story really is just about human souls. Thankfully, the biblical story is about the cosmos. It's about the universe. It's about what God is doing everywhere. And so many of the promises that we look at in the teaching have to do with all things being united together in heaven and on earth again. Mm. So there's the union of heaven and earth, the separation or rupture of heaven and earth, and then the reconciliation of heaven and earth. Humans are a huge part of that because of our place as image bearers. Yeah. That is why we care.
Wow.
Now, when it comes to fracking, when it comes to gas, when it comes to the Dakota pipelines, some of this stuff I feel like is above my pay grade. But I would say this, it seems as if Christians should always start from the place of we don't touch it. We don't touch it. We got to get creative other ways. We don't touch it. And then be convinced that it's in the best interest of our neighbor and or creation itself to touch it. But that should be our starting place. Our starting place should not be, well, it's sitting there, so let's use it. Our economy needs it. We don't want to be dependent on foreign oil. Nope. It seems like the theological place is to say, well, don't touch it. If these animals are endangered, let's protect them, right? If we're seeing our policies are changing with the weather patterns throughout the world, we got to change them. Mm-hmm. So, and the one last thing I would say, I know I'm rambling. I hope it's good. Andy, is it good?
Yeah, it's good. Okay. I'm waiting for you to kind of go where you're going. I have some thoughts, but go ahead.
I've got one last.
Yeah.
Go where I'm going.
Yeah.
And that is like the whole climate change thing. I'm not a scientist. I don't know a scientist.
Not a single one.
Maybe I do.
All these years of church, and we know no scientists.
Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? Right?
Oh, that's
because
funny.
We are perceived as anti-science.
Yeah.
But there is this, I've just seen it in some brands or some circles of Christianity, this conspiracy theory thing where it's like climate change is a hoax, not a host. It's a hoax purveyed by the liberal media. I don't know to what end, maybe to stifle business or something, but there is this conspiracy theory kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you just want to go, okay. Even if that were true, even if it were a total hoax, shouldn't we still be the people leading the charge for we should reduce pollution like automatically? Shouldn't we be the people pushing for like massive rethinkings of fuels and fossil fuels and right? I mean, you would think
even if it were all human flourishing.
even if it were all a hoax.
Yeah.
We want to promote flourishing wherever it's found. God shalom, wherever we can promote it, we want to find it there. Okay, go ahead, Andy Bear.
I can hear like I'm not asking you to combat this either. I think it's just the dynamic end of even imagining a new eternal earth in which it becomes the rejoining of the heavens and the earth. It's hard because in my mind I keep hearing the science of like stars die. Therefore our galaxy is, perpetually doomed, so to speak. Like it's like
but what's the curse, Andy? What's the curse? The wages of sin is
death.
Right. So so the curse is humans die.
Yeah.
That creation, if untouched, will run itself out.
Right.
I mean that it's not it's not eternal.
Yeah.
So what's new? What's the removal of death?
Right. Life.
Right. It's the removal of death, and in the Bible, it's the removal of death and removal of suffering.
Sure. And I mean, I get the hypothetical imagination of the science thing with it. It's kind of like, well, then ultimately God could easily make a new Earth. I mean, we look around at like the millions of planets and everything that's out there based on what we know about the cosmos. So it's not to say like we're going to transport to a different Earth that's already out there and whatever. So, I mean, I'm not answering anything. It's just
this Earth 2.0.
Yeah, it's interesting to like live in the argument of like, well, this Earth will be renewed and won't be destroyed, and even then it's just like, well, I guess it could be, and then but it's fascinating around the science of black holes and just like time-space continuum in black holes, where it's so crazy fascinating, and there's really no like tangible like, what does that actually mean for an eternal existence?
Seismic Mike has nothing on this.
Yeah, that's all out there. I think I'd be curious, but it's that. Anyways, I'm just thinking about that stuff. It's like I can see throwing this argument even into the scientific debate set thing. It's like, yeah, but it's like that makes it that argument does not work if we look at what the universe is doing. But that's a universe without a God, and that's a universe without a God that can shape it to do whatever he wants it to do.
No. It's a universe it's a universe under bondage. It's a universe under the curse of death.
Okay.
So
okay.
Yeah. So again, I'm not a scientist nor the son of one.
Right.
And so I have no doubt the science is fascinating on this.
Yeah.
To me, we shouldn't be anti-science. For the very reason that the more we learn, the more worship bubbles up, right? I mean, you just are
absolutely.
like that, man. When you're looking at deep space through the Hubble telescope, is that for those whose hearts are open to God? That does nothing but call out awe and wonder and mystery and beauty. When you study strings theory and quarks and black holes, I mean, you're just like, this is infinitely complex and infinitely majestic. And but it all sits under a curse, the curse of death, the curse of extinction, the curse of of heat death somewhere, billions of years from now or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the interesting biblical problem is, okay, well, what do you do when the image bearers that you designed to create and care for the earth become part of the problem? Mm-hmm. How do you rescue the image bearers and restore them to their image bearing? Right? How do you, so that's the conundrum of, okay, if God's going to purge evil from the world and every human heart is bent towards evil in some way, shape, or form, well, then you've just lost humanity.
Right.
So the cosmic rescue operation in Jesus, yes, concerns individuals, but it's also cosmic in scope. And that's the tension we try to hold, is that on the one hand, yes, the people that care about what happens when you die, yes, of course. But it's bigger than that, and it's more beautiful than that. And so why are we considered anti-science? Well, so many reasons. We're conspiracy theorists. We say everything. We see everything as the work of godless atheists, and so those godless atheists say, that the Earth is 8 billion years old or 20 billion years old. Well, then they've got to be lying, because Genesis says, that it's 4,000 years old or whatever, and you realize, oh, well, we've been reading Genesis wrong, actually. It's just they've been. And it's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous the way they've been set opposite each other. Yeah. I'm opposed to naturalism, which is the understanding of the universe where there is no God. I'm a theist. I believe in God. I think God's fingerprints are all over the place. So but I'm not anti-science. I'm and I'm not anti-atheistic science. I'm just anti the story that says the Carl Sagan story. The universe is, was, and always will be. Right? It's just that's all there is and all there ever will be. I don't believe that. I don't believe that for reasons we've talked about.
Yeah.
So anyway, holy cow, Andy, what's our time?
Oh, 45.
Oh, okay. I'm tired.
Yeah.
So we're studying hell and for Christmas, which I just think is hilarious. And so that was part of what we were talking about yesterday, but I thought it was really relevant because my 11-year-old little girl, Hannah, she asked me the other day, same topic. She's like, she said, why should we be good? Why should we do good things if we just go to heaven when we die?
Yeah.
Like, why do anything that's good? Like, if that's already taken care of, why do anything that's good? And there's so many answers to that question. But one of them is, well, because the good carries forward. The good carries forward. It's not just thrown away, right? It's not just the wells that you make and the people that are fed. I mean, that isn't thrown away. It's not like God just says, well, I'm starting the whole thing over. It's an upgrade. It's an upgrade. And so I don't know how it's carried forward. I don't know in what manner it is. I just know that Jesus, Paul, and the New Testament are so clear that what we're doing here, if it is of God and aligned with God's purposes, pushes forward into the new creation. And then there's this really weird verse in that 2 Peter passage where it talks about the possibility that you can speed up the day of God's coming. Like it literally says that. It talks about the coming of the Lord and working to speed its coming. And I have no idea what that means. I just think it's so fascinating. So all that is to say, so my point yesterday was if you don't get heaven and earth right, you don't get hell right.
Yeah.
But my point today is if you don't get heaven and earth right, you don't get the environment right. You don't get the earth right. Right? I mean, you just think it's the Titanic, the whole thing's going to burn, so who cares? That's not the picture we get. So if you want more, go to that teaching. That'll give you a little more Bible if you're interested in that. Otherwise, would love your thoughts. Oh my goodness, Brad and Facebook group and anyone else listening to this would love your thoughts about this stuff.
Yeah.
All right?
All right.
Any other thoughts, Andy Bear?
No, that's it.
All right. Brothers and sisters, what episode is this? Do you know?
No, I lost count.
Okay.
5, 6.
All right. So whatever your age is. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance to you, and may he in these days give you peace. We are so honored to be part of your life, whether you're driving, working out, you've fallen asleep, you've fallen down and you can't get up. Whatever that is, we are thrilled to be a part of your life. And drop us a line. Let us know how we're doing. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Vox Podcast. Learn more about us at voxpodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter at the Vox Podcast, and now support us on Patreon at patreon.com/voxpodcast.